Oh, gosh. We're here with Joey Reynolds, who is literally a radio icon and a broadcast icon to millions of people. But unfortunately, he is also unknown to millions of others. So I thought we hear Joey Reynolds this, Joey Reynolds that. I thought we would find out today who Joey Reynolds is, where he started, and bring everybody up to speed on that. So Joey, my first question is, now you're from Buffalo, New York originally?
Yes. Why can't I be from normal parents? I know.
Well, everybody's got to be from somewhere. So
everybody is somewhere. I'm somewhere. Oh, are you interviewing me or am I interviewing you?
No, I'm interviewing you.
Okay, thank you.
Joey, how did you get interested in radio?
I had some money and I called Bernie Madoff and gave him some. No, that's the wrong story. I got interested in radio. I was a poor kid in a neighborhood in Buffalo that was falling apart. And I went to the Buffalo Boys Club, and to get girls, you had to be popular. And on the third floor, we had a PA system for dances on Friday, and I wanted to be the jock so that people would come and gather around me. Unfortunately, there were 5 other guys, and they were far more appropriate. You know, they were sports guys and jocks, real jocks, and in sports. And I was sitting there with like a hockey puck. But I proved my point. You know what? I got the hell out of there and made some money.
So tell us about that.
Which did get the girls when you have the money. You see, it wasn't the popularity. That's a misconception. Is that fame and fortune? You got to have the kissing cousins.
There you go. So tell us about that process. You said, okay, I want to be with the girls. I want to be popular. How did you actually get into radio? What was the process like?
Well, I went to school with Danny Neverett, who was later on we made records together, and we're on the radio together. Same stations. Danny was a great. He was ahead of me, in age and Bishop time in high school, and he always seemed to be very popular. And when I went to the boys' club, they all gathered around him. So. He belonged to that radio club upstairs, and I wanted in. I said, wait a minute, it's got to be the place. Because, hanging around the ice cream parlor, don't forget, in those days, a phosphate was what a Diet Coke was called, because it was from the fountain. It was 10 cents. A pack of Marlboros was a quarter, and not everybody had a car. The gasoline was like 20 cents, a gallon. It was a different time, And we hung around, and there was a guy on the radio called the Hound Dog. And Elvis Presley did a song about him and came to Buffalo. So I said, wow, that's a pretty cool thing. I used to like the Hound Dog. I loved the song. And I chose Elvis over Pat Boone, which was the choice we made back in the days. You were either a greaser or you were an Ivy. And I was a greaser more. I'm kind of in the middle, but I favored Elvis Presley. I liked Elvis. And I joined the Hound Dog Club. I went to the Boys Club. I was trying to find something that I would, where I could fit into this society. I think everybody has that at the beginning. You don't know where the hell you belong. And I found myself gravitating towards the electronic media that was in existence, very minor in those days. But I liked the idea of reaching other people without having them see me. See, that was radio, because then you can be fat and unattractive and still have the girls if you get the money. Don't forget the money part. and they like popularity. People like popularity. This is a country. I'm not going to give you the philosophy. You know what it is. It's all about competition. That's why you have these lame judges on television who sit there. They can't do the talent that they're judging. They're not half the talent of the people they judge. And so I realized that a long time ago. I knew it when I was a kid. I says, I don't have to be as good as the artists who are on the music. I only have to be the guy who presents it. And that was the key for me to radio with music, in case you're asking me. That's a long answer to your question.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I understand the radio aspect of it, but when you were in high school, when you were in school, were there any other things that you were thinking about that you were going to be or wanted to pursue, but other than radio?
Yeah, we were an all-boys school. I wanted to get the hell out of there. And I actually left the Bishop Timon and went to a technical school to learn electronics. because this is a little known thing. There was a movie theater, we call it the Rat Hole, because, movies were 9 cents on a matinee and you get 30 cartoons and a feature film. And I love the whole idea of being on the air, but I also like the idea of the motion pictures. And I wanted to be a projectionist because that's the only way I could get in. See, when you don't have anybody sponsoring you or fathering you or nobody in the family, nobody went to college, we didn't have the education and we didn't have the means to get to do anything. You start to figure out how you're gonna make have some fun in life. So that's what I did. What are we pausing here for something?
No. So let me ask you this. You eventually ended up on WKBW, which was a big station back
years later.
That was years later. What was your first station?
The Boys Club, WBCV, and then I went to WWOL in Buffalo, which was a local radio station that was a daytimer. It was on, sunrise to sunset. Popular jock on there, a guy named Tom Clay. He was very, very popular. He climbed a billboard and tied up traffic on Main Street. That was in the 50s, late 50s. So, stunts were very important in radio in the early days to get attention.
Yeah.
And the radio stations were based on personality, not the music. The music was a sideshow. And then, of course, when the Beatles came, then we became the sideshow, and that's when I got out.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand the competition of someone being more famous and popular.
So how long was it before you got onto KBW, and how did that actually happen? How did you actually get the job there?
I kept bothering the person who was programming, and they kept turning me down. Nobody wanted to hear my tapes. Nobody wanted to meet with me. I worked the room. So what I did was I won a contest on television. The very most famous sports guy, who had a great mind, incidentally, had a sports show late night on NBC's own television station. They owned a television station in Buffalo, which was unusual. It was a UHF station, the most powerful station in the country, with Watts. They were in UHF business. Just to give you a sidebar, also in Hartford, they bought one. But in Buffalo, I was on the VH station, and the guy who was the sports guy had a contest, and I won it. And the reason that I won it was because I mimeographed the votes. And the thing was, I got caught.
You didn't do that.
I sure did. I had more votes than anybody in town. And then the ad agency said, well, we can't give you the prize because you rigged the contest, but we'd like to hire you as a salesperson because you're so full of crap, you'd be great here. And I did. So when I went to WWOL, I was as a salesperson, and running the board for all these foreign shows was what I got paid for. So I learned every language. I had 6 language shows that were on. In radio in those days, you had to do everything. You had to learn how to splice tape and also put up with everybody else's attitude in all formats.
So let me ask you a question. When you were at KBW, did you realize immediately how big the station was, how many listeners you had? I mean, did you ever stop and think, wow, I've got listeners down in the South? Did you ever?
No, I was myopic. Always, all my career, including from the Boys Club up and in Buffalo on WWOL, WBNY, where I worked with Casey Kasem. He was called Casey at the mic. That's a whole other story. You talk about that dog that he made fun of. He did this live in the hall when he painted the "I Quit" on the Hilton Hotel floor that we were on, and he painted the whole hallway with "I Quit" to the owners of the station. Anyway, that's another story, but they're all stories. But I was on the air, and I realized that being on the air was just simply me and someone else. And I never thought of it as being, how many people are you reaching? See, this is a phenomenon right now. People look at the internet and they want to count clicks. I never counted clicks. I couldn't give a crap about a click in my life. I still don't. I don't care how many people watch me. I care about the one I'm talking to. I'm talking to you right now. I'm not thinking about who's watching us, what I have to watch, what I'm going to say, who's going to like me, who's not going to like me, who's tuning out. That's just a lot of crap. I never did that, and I'm not going to do it ever, and I could die that way because I'm really adamant about it. I think it's a personal medium. We call it social networking. I don't think anybody wants to see a selfie. except the person who's shooting it, and maybe the family members if you can tie them up in a chair and force them to watch it. Selfie is the most indignant, and it's just an indignation. It's a pastime for fools. You take a picture of yourself and pass it around like everybody's interested, and they all have to go ooh and ah and goo goo and gaga like when you have a baby, which is also, there's a lot of fake in that too, but that's social. It's
all right.
social.
Let me ask you a question. You've been on how many stations? 29 stations? Big stations?
42 of them.
Oh, okay, 42. I lost count. Maybe
well,
you did.
So did I.
But and you were in some of the biggest markets in the United States. If you could think back, where did you have the most fun in your career? At what station? Where were you at? What market?
Wherever I was
okay.
Was the most fun. Once again, I have always been personal. It's who I'm with. I concentrate on who I'm with and what I'm doing. I don't have that scope of the outside world. I just don't. It's in me. I don't know why. I can't answer it. I've been through a lot of therapy, but I don't really care about anybody else when I'm with you. That's the way it is.
That's good. Well, now let me ask you another question along those same lines. You've met thousands of personalities, celebrities, rulers, potentates, popes through your life. Tell me a few of the people that you met that really impressed you personally.
Well, let's start with Mother Teresa. I mean, that would be an easy one. Mother Teresa was a wonderful guest on my show. And, she became a saint by religion. But I liked her because she was a little woman that she's like Dr. Ruth. I always liked too. She was about her size, and she sat across from me. She had her legs were moving on the chair, and I had to keep lowering the chair so she could touch the floor. It's fun, And she was a real person. I said, "Do you ever get mad?" She said, "Oh yeah." I said, "What do you do?" She said, I do something for someone else when I get mad, and then I repeat the action 10 times." And so I said, "Well, how do you live your life?" She says, "Well, I do things for other people." She said, "That's where I get my joy." And I said, I had Mavan Chawla there. He was the minister at India, and he was there with me. And he said, Mother came to me from Calcutta, and she asked me to build an orphanage. And I asked her, how much money do you have? And she says, I have 10 or 15 rupees. And he says, you can't build anything. She says, oh, yeah, but with God and 15 rupees, I can build anything. So that was her faith. And, it's people like that. They determine where you're going to go next because you picked up something if you have that.
Right, let me ask you a question now. A lot of us know about your radio career. One day you moved out to California and you started a jingles company, which was pretty successful. Tell us about that. How was that transition?
Well, it wasn't a jingles company. Actually, it was a production company. And okay. I had, with my partner, Rod McBrien, who's passed now, years ago, actually. He was a brilliant guy. Rod and I determined that we were going to put songs about the station over the record, which violated a lot of the principles. Like Harry Nilsson wanted to kill me. He was almost throwing me off the roof of the Hyatt Hotel one time. He says, you're ruining my performance. I put that intro on there. I write that. He said, I write this music. I produce this to be like this. He says, and and you're screwing it up. He said, be putting the call letters of a station, singing it, imitating the background of the record, singing the call letters on my production. And I said, yeah, because it promotes the station. But don't forget, on the station that we sold it to, they're going to play your record more than the other one because their call letters are on it. I said, so it's a commercial reason too. I don't buy it, he says. He says, I'll tell you what, I'm going to screw you up. The next record will not have an intro. And I said, yeah. Well, he had no intro on the next record, so I had someone do it a cappella, which was just a group without an intro. So, then he got pissed off. But you gotta take this as fun. If you're not having fun with these things in life, why are you doing it? Nobody wants to have a job in a steel plant for 40 years and get a gold watch and their stupid ass pension plan. Nobody wants that. People do it for other reasons. They do it because they want to have money to send their kids to college, because they don't have the talent to do anything else, perhaps, or the desire. That's part of it. And people do things for a lot of reasons, but I was never that person. I just thought this was foolish. See, to me, this is all foolishness. I think the celebrity game in America is outrageously overdone. I mean, everybody's a celebrity anyway. In my life, ask Andy
Has it
Warhol.
always been? Has it always been? Is it always been overdone? Now we had some big celebrities.
No, because it was a specialized field. It was not overdone during the age of control on Hollywood movie stars. There was a system. There was one in radio there was a system to have your music on the air. It was a privilege to have your music on the air. Now you can be any jaboni can get a record on the air with payola and knowing someone and having no talent virtually because no one knows what's right or wrong. It's a very different world now. It's not a world of excellence and quality. It's a world of quantity. Click this, you know.
You've outlived a lot of the big celebrities. In fact, I just learned a few moments ago that Little Richard passed away.
Yeah, I love him, and he was a good friend.
Yeah,
you know, he was at my induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah. When was that, Joey? The induction?
I think it was 1989, something like that.
That was a big.
Maybe
event.
it was 90, maybe. I forget. It was a big event because I was celebrated with other people who needed to be celebrated. See, when you are walking among giants, you don't become a giant, but you feel like you are doing something that makes you feel better than if they're all following this person. See, people who follow all these other people can be a pain in the ass because they stick their nose in your food. They always take pictures and autographs. You hear stars complain about that all the time. There's a price to pay with fame. Now, I like the other part of it. I like the idea that I was responsible, but no one knew it. It's under the radar. It's fun. I mean, it's fun to know. Like Star Wars. I didn't do Star Wars. I mean, George Lucas did Star Wars, but I was in on it. And so I was orchestrating things that made it happen, but I wasn't the guy that made it happen.
Well, one of your big stories was what you did with Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, which kind of put both of you on the map, even on a higher level. Tell us a little bit about that, how that actually happened.
I was good friends with Bob Crew, who was a producer and couldn't get a hit to get his, he was just really overproducing everything and never having a hit. So when he ran out of money, he was in the studio at the, I think it's the basement of the Taft Hotel. I was at the session because I was friends with him. And I watched the session and it was simple. They had a board and they moved their feet on it. You know, Bob had these boots and did Sherry, baby, you know. And Bob Gaudio was there and playing a little keyboard and a little Tommy DeVito was playing the guitar. The group was there, and then Frankie's outrageously high voice for a man his age, and he suffered from having. He was what they would call a castrato. So I liked the record. I liked the production. And when I went back home to Hartford on WPOP in Hartford, where I was on the radio, Bob had another recording artist who lived in Connecticut, Matthew Reed, and he was a guy who was from Cheshire, Connecticut. And he brought me two of the discs from that particular session that were not released yet, and they were not mastered. They're what they do after a session is you make a copy to take home so that you know how you're going to mix it. It's a working disc. He had two of them and he gave them to me. He said he's going to keep one for himself, but I wore it out at playing it on the air, so he gave me the other one. So now I'm playing both of them. I never said anything in between the records. I just segued one to the other, to the other, to the other, so I could do that with two records. You can't do it with one. And I did that for about 3-4 hours, and the police came. They wondered what was going on. We were right across the street from the mansion of the governor in Hartford, on Asylum Street. Good name. And the governor's son was a teenager. Used to like me. Kevin Dempsey came over and wondered what the hell was going on. Because here I am playing this record over and over again. They thought I died, had a heart attack. Maybe something got stuck. It was a gag, you know. But I didn't do that for Frankie. I did that for Bob Crew. And you know, then Frankie got famous with the group. But it was really a favor for Bob because I wanted to see him have a hit. I liked him. He was my friend. That was the reason.
You're still friends with Frankie to this day and other members of the group.
Well, I mean, I'm friends with them now, but the purpose back then was Bob. Bob was a genius, but, you know, he was a wonderful Oh, you know what he did? I mean, God, he didn't just do that. He
Right.
didn't just do the Four Seasons. He did a lot of things.
Now, out of radio, I guess partly still in radio, you've done a lot of other things. You worked for 20th Century. You were involved with Star Wars promotion. Tell us about the Star Wars.
Well, it was part of my job. I was a creative director, and it, you know, I mean, we had a lot of. There was an idea bank. You got to know, I was very loose, and I was always being threatened to be fired because I broke through a lot of the corporate caca, and I, you know, I mean, they don't like that. People don't like. They get nervous with it. You know, you're not going to keep a job when you're playing around with big time producers and executives. You know, I mean, people are very self-centered.
Yeah.
So for one thing, just to further it, I had an office, about 18 people that I had under me for all different things. And I took all the one sheets off the wall and I painted it all white so that no one who ever came to visit, none of the artists or the producers or the directors or the stars, never knew what I was working on because their egos were too much. I had one petrified fish hanging over my desk in the middle of the room. I had a round table, and I got it from another genius. Evan Maurer was his name. Did spectacular multimedia shows. Anyway, that's another story too. These are all stories. But the fish was hanging. He got it from Scandinavia, and it's a petrified fish, and it had it was hanging from the ceiling, and I put a note in its mouth that says, "Everything needs a hook." And that was the mantra of the whole idea of everything needed a hook, including "May the Force be with you."
Okay, tell us a quick story about Les Paul, because he's one of my favorite all-time guitarists and innovators in music. How did you meet Les Paul?
Well, I was on the air, and he had earlier in L.A., I was with a guy who had was doing a documentary on Les Paul and never finished it. And he was a guy who invented the VU meter that competed with Dolby Sound. You know, we got Academy Awards. This guy, Mike, had invented this Duro meter, Mike Duro. And the Duro meter is for professional purposes, like when they make a soundtrack in a motion picture studio, it has color instead of that needle that gives you 10%, 20%. It had color bars. And he invented that. So I liked Mike. And at that time I was at 20th Century Fox. I was pretty much into everybody who was innovative. I loved innovation. That's why I was, always a fan of that. And I sought that out. So Mike Duro I met. I never knew him earlier. And he had the Duro meter, and he had the unfinished Les Paul video, which he showed me. And he was working on it for years because he was from Wisconsin, as Les was from Wisconsin. And he had a storage bin in Wisconsin, so did Les. So I didn't know too much about Les Paul, except I knew about the hit records. I didn't ever play them because I was too young. But I was curious about his life and Mary Ford and the triple recording technique and, getting that sound on sound, which everybody used in recording later on. He was a wonderful genius as well. So, and I use that word. I overused it, but not in this case. It's appropriate. So I went to when I got to New York, there was an engineers convention years later, and Mike Duro came into the city and was on my show. And I said, "It's too bad Les died because you could have finished that documentary. It was quite interesting." And he said, "Yeah." So don't you know, I got a flag from the control room, and someone signaled me to. I didn't take phone calls in those days, but I did from special calls, interviews. And it was Les Paul. He had called from the Tappan Zee Bridge. He had just came out of the Cleveland Clinic where he had a stent put in his heart. And he says, "You almost gave me another heart attack. Who the hell are you?" He says, I didn't die. And I said, "Oh, I'm Joey Reynolds. Never heard of you." And then he came to me weeks later. He said he would like to visit sometime. And he brought me a list of disc jockeys. Everybody whoever had done anything in radio, and I wasn't on that list. and they ranged from Alan Freed to Les Paul to Casey Kasem. Everybody was on that list, and I wasn't on the list. And I kind of thought about it for a while, and I looked at it and I said, well, this is a list of everybody who took payoffs, because you pay to have your records played back then on Capitol. He says, oh, yeah. I said, I was never on that list. I never took any money from anybody. So I failed on the payoff list.
Oh, it's okay.
I mean, even he went to, before he was Congress, that's a true story. It's not, I didn't make it up. Alan Freed died from that.
You've always been an innovator and out-of-the-box thinker on this thing. And you tell us a little bit about that idea of Triplecast that you came up with some years ago.
Well, I saw that the phone was going to direct the traffic, which we're doing right now. You're on an iPhone. I'm on an iPhone. We don't have a lot of mobility with it because we don't have any engineers running it. And this is the way television works right now, because everybody who is on television is at home. And as long as they are quarantined, they have a cell phone, and they're on the network with it. So everybody on the network looks like I've been looking for 3 years with my little cell phone. But a few years back, I saw the revolution, because I lived with Jack Wayman, who founded the Consumer Electronics Association. He took me in after I had a flood in my apartment in Harlem, and I liked him very much. He was 95 years old. And he had a caregiver, and he liked mentoring me, as did Les Paul. I'm a good pigeon for that. So he asked me if I would like to join him with the Consumer Electronics Association and all this. I knew nothing about technology. And I stayed with it, just stayed with it. And I saw it coming. I saw this coming like a freight train. I said, nobody is going to ever turn on the radio the way we used to. And the only time we're going to use it is in the car. That's why you don't have a lot of ratings right now, because people aren't driving like they were. They're getting back to it now, but it's a failure that it's a failure to acknowledge the existence of something better. And people, for some reason, we want to hold on to it. It's like in Buffalo, I say it's like an abortion baby in Buffalo. We want to hold on to that. It's gone. You have to let it go. So letting go is a big process. Big. Humans we're animals of my biggest fear is that I will lose what I have and I won't get what I want. And we're creatures of habit.
Let me wrap it up, but with this question. You've got a podcast now that people can hear your rantings and your ideas and so forth. How do we get a hold of you, and how do we listen to that podcast?
Not only that, thanks to my friend Frank Minishak, we're on all platforms, every one of them. The only one I'm not on is the subway in New York, and thank God for that. But we're on every platform you could think of. Facebook is Instagram. That's their little baby toy. And then we got the TikTok for idiots like me who want to stand there and be a tall white guy dancing.
And the name of your Facebook page is what?
The Late Joey Reynolds.
The Late Joey Reynolds.
Yeah, because I've always never been on time. I'm always ahead of the curve, not because I died.
Okay, and people can message you and ask you about your life and ideas from there. You've inspired so many people over the years. Have you ever stayed in touch with some of the people that have had big careers because of you?
Yeah, well, yeah, but I don't take that bow. I mean, I stay in touch with everybody because I like them. If I liked you to begin with, why would I not like you now? It stays with you. I have a big list of people I like. I don't expect them to watch me on my podcast. I expect those people to be on the podcast, like yourself.
Are you going to write another book?
No. Well, first of all, we don't do print the way we used to, for one thing, and I certainly could do a download book. But I think right now I don't want to hurt anybody else in my life. I want to go to my grave not having a telltale breath. I don't like it. I never liked it. I was, Judith Reagan's one of my best friends. She did Private Parts. I would never tell. Judith said, do a telltale book. She had her own imprint. She, with Murdoch and HarperCollins. I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to have a story about someone's laundry. Why do I want to talk about you, what I know about you that is not pleasant? For what? So I get more famous?
Any final thought you want to leave with us?
Yeah. Well, you're my friend and I love you, and that's it. And stay alive and wear a mask and wash your hands. That's all, saying like we all got to do and get through all of this stuff. And we will. It's an apocalypse. And when this ends, then everybody will look back and try to forget it. But I don't. I think this has been a great learning curve. It's a time for us to really bond again and realize that the planet is on an even playing field again. So now we can start over again and do it over again and do it right this time. And I wish we would stop going back to the new normal, the near normal, the abnormal. I don't want to hear any of that crap. Let's just go on.
There you go.
You know,
Joey, thank you very much. Thank you for your thoughts.
Yeah, let a smile be your umbrella.
Thanks.
But what? But don't get a mouthful of rain.
There you go. Thank you.
All right.